And so the representative from the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, Mr. De Leon, please go ahead. So, very good morning to you all, ladies and gentlemen. Please be welcome to this national workshop for the evaluation of the country strategy and program co-organized by the government of the Republic of Colombia and the International Fund for Agricultural Development, IFAD. In the framework of this process conducted by the Independent Office of Evaluation of IFAD, we have created this forum in order to submit to you the main findings and recommendations that will lead to an interactive discussion and debate that will have the participation of both beneficiaries, partners, cooperating instances, stakeholders, and representatives both of the national government and IFAD as well. This workshop has a purpose to generate reflections on the future guidelines for the program, IFAD's program in the country, taking into account the major challenges on a national level and also international level. That is the reduction of rural poverty, the fight against combat against hunger and climate change. And the official opening of this national workshop will be done by the representative of the Ministry of Foreign Affairs of Colombia, Mr. Jorge Torres, the director of the Independent Office of Evaluation, Mr. Naito, and the Deputy Vice President of the Program Administration in IFAD, Mr. Donald Brown. So very good morning to all of you, dear Ambassador of Colombia in Italy, representatives, permanent representatives, and Dr. Rosanna Palastri, Dr. Inda Naidu, Director of the Independent Office of Evaluation, Director of the Country Program for Colombia. It is a pleasure to be representing the Ministry of Foreign Affairs here this morning, or afternoon, for those of you joining from Rome, and to welcome you to this national workshop that is under the framework of the evaluation of the strategy and program for the country. It is a very rigorous process that has been led by the Independent Office of Evaluation of IFAD in order to share the main findings and recommendations that have come out of this evaluation in the period 2008 to 2021, where we had two strategic opportunity programs, two credit operations, and almost 14 donations to the country. IFAD has been a major partner for the government of Colombia in these last 40 years. It has supported the country's efforts to reduce rural poverty and to promote the associative movement, mostly in areas where there were subject to violence in the past. So we have indeed strengthened the social tissue and the social fabric and promoted the empowerment of the different populations, such as the young, women, indigenous peoples, among other so vulnerable populations. This process that has been conducted during 2022 has not only included the national government and IFAD's agencies and bodies, but also the different implementing partners and beneficiaries, associations and families that across the national territory have made it possible to create opportunities in the environment and have made more dynamic the local economy. This is most important for the government because our aim is to achieve a total peace by means of these transformations that need to be generated from the grassroots and from the people living in our territory. So as a result of the latest initiatives that have been supported by IFAD, many of those, we have had many success stories, and we have many of the representatives of those success stories here, and we are very happy to have them with us so they can tell us about their experiences. This workshop is also very it comes very much to the point, because it not only will not only deal with the positive results achieved, but also lessons learned and challenges in terms of sustainability, scaling up, etc. And this is why, from the national government, we consider that all the different recommendations will be the basis for for defining a new agenda for cooperation. We believe that this will also need to include other stakeholders, such as bilateral partners and the UN system agencies that are operating in Colombia. We consider with a very positive view the proposal of a part that will include a reflection on the future of the future guidance for IFAD's action in the country, because we are currently undergoing a transformation process in the country to reduce the rural poverty and fight against hunger. So we consider that this is very timely, because we are about to begin the new negotiations for the new sustainable development framework together with the United Nations. So IFAD will be able to work on this under this framework using its own competitive edge. From here at the national government, we would like to encourage everybody here to participate and to share their ideas about how we can actually work on these priorities in the future. This dialogue will facilitate the work that it will be most beneficial for all the parties involved. Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Director. Now we will move on to listen to the Director General of the Independent Office of Evaluation, Dr. Indanaro.
Greetings, Excellency Ms. Ligia Pitar, Ambassador of the Government of the Republic of Colombia and Permanent Representative to the United Nations agencies in Rome, Mr. Juan Ferrero, Minister Counselor and Alternative Permanent Representative of the Government of the Republic of Colombia in Rome, Mr. Jorge Rueda, Director of International Cooperation, Ministry of Foreign Affairs, Mr. Nicolas Pena, Director of Productive Capacity and Income Generation, Ministry of Agriculture and Rural Development, Ms. Maria Pena Moreno, Director of Rural Development, Department of National Planning, Mr. Vera, Director of Investment and Public Finance, Department of National Planning. Distinguished representatives of the Government of the Republic of Colombia, representatives of IFAD, partner institutions, international organizations, and producer associations. Ladies and gentlemen, it is my pleasure to be part of this virtual national workshop organized by the IEO of IFAD in collaboration with the Government of Republic of Colombia and the Latin America and Caribbean Division of IFAD. The workshop follows the finalization of the country's strategy and program evaluation and provides an opportunity to share and discuss the main findings and recommendations with the government, IFAD, and other stakeholders and partners. I would like to start by expressing my appreciation to the government, in particular to the Ministry of Foreign Affairs for hosting the event, and to the Ministry of Agriculture and Rural Development for the collaboration on this evaluation. Thanks also to the National Coordination Unit of the project, El Campo Emprende, at the Ministry of Agriculture and Rural Development for their support to the evaluation mission in 2022. I recognize the support of IFAD Program Management Department, in particular Mr. Donald Brown, Associate Vice President, Ms. Rosanna Polastri, Director of IFAD's Latin American and Caribbean Division, and Ms. Peltola, IFAD Country Director for Colombia. Finally, I thank the evaluation team, initially led by Simona Sommer, and then by Mr. Max Coesi, Lead Evaluation Officer, with the support of Fabrizio Faloni, Deputy Director. Sean Ryan and Antonella Sisti provided efficient administrative support to the team and to the organization of today's event. Thanks to the consultants who contributed to the evaluation analysis and event organization. Claudia Ranaboldo, Jose Antonio Perez Arenas, Giovanni Renondo, Daniel Wiesner, Federica Lomiri, Alish Formica. Ladies and gentlemen, let me first highlight the importance of the independent evaluation function. The IEO of IFAD undertakes impartial and evidence-based evaluations of projects, country programs, and corporate policies to assess the results achieved and to generate lessons to enhance the impact of IFAD-supported interventions in improving rural livelihoods and enabling rural transformation. In Colombia, since 1981, IFAD has financed 4 projects with $74 million for a total project cost of $187 million. IFAD has consistently supported, under the demand approach, the rural initiatives and business plans of small-scale farmers and entrepreneurs. This was the first independent country strategy and program evaluation. The objectives of this evaluation were to assess the results and performance of the IFAD-supported strategy and programs since 2008 and provide findings and recommendations to inform the next IFAD country strategy and the future partnership between IFAD and the government. Ladies and gentlemen, my colleague Fabrizio Poloni and Ms. Claudio Ranaboldo will deliver a more comprehensive presentation later, but I would like to highlight a few key findings from the evaluation. The evaluation noted major achievements in the diversification of rural strategies for the poorest population, including indigenous peoples, Afro-Colombian communities, women and youth in complex and post-conflict territories. Notable results on the ground included empowerment of marginalized rural actors, strengthening local capacities for resilience and associative management in very different rural contexts. IFAD-funded interventions helped restore social capital and cohesion. This helped build a more dynamic environment for creating jobs and income opportunities in rural Colombia. It also promoted rural-urban economic interactions and economic growth in intermediate towns. On the other hand, there are many areas for improvement that deserve further attention. Firstly, more needs to be done for sustainability on 3 levels. 1, the economic and financial sustainability of business local plans. 2, environmental sustainability through a broader territorial and agroeconomic vision. And 3, institutional sustainability, especially through greater collaboration with local governments. Furthermore, it will be important to increase cooperation with other international, national, and territorial agencies and institutions, establish more systematic dialogue on public policies, and strengthen strategies for knowledge management and communication. Hopefully, this will help increase the size, coherence, and development results. As evaluators, we have provided an impartial assessment of IFAD's program in Colombia. Now, with your support, we can gain better understanding of future opportunities and ways to overcome constraints to promote inclusive, sustainable, and resilient transformation of the rural economy. I thank you for your attention.
Muchas gracias, señor director general. Escucharemos ahora la intervención.
Thank you very much, Director General. Now, the Deputy Vice President, Mr. Donald Brown. So thank you. Good morning and good afternoon, everyone. Mr. Torres, Director for International Cooperation, the Ministry of Foreign Affairs in Colombia, Dr. Lydia Margarita Guidar, Ambassador of Colombia before the Republic of Italy, and permanent representative before the FAO, IFAD, and WFP, Dr. Juan Camilo Zaretsky, Chancellor Minister at the Embassy of Colombia before the Italian Republic, Dr. Maria Peña, Director for Rural Development at the National Planning Department, Dr. Clara Vera, Director of Finance and Public Investment at the National Planning Department, representatives of the different partners of this IFAD supported program, representatives, Dr. Naito, Director of the Independent Office of Evaluation. I'd like to begin by thanking the government of the Republic of Colombia, as well as the Independent Office of Evaluation of IFAD, to conduct so successfully these process for the strategy and country program evaluation process. So as we know, Colombia is an important country for IFAD investment, joint investments conducted in the last 4 decades in the country through a project program amount to over $163 million. Out of this figure, almost 74 million are related to funding granted by IFAD. Through our portfolio projects, we have promoted productivity, market access, and financial instruments, as well as women's empowerment, among other issues. This, together with donations focused on issues such as youth and cultural diversity, have in turn consolidated as a comprehensive intervention program. Today's workshop in this regard is key for IFAD, not only because it allows us to review in a very timely manner this country program, but also because this is the first evaluation conducted by the IOE in Colombia. This the period, this evaluation period coincides with the transition period as well towards a new peace framework in Colombia. The assessment, the evaluation has highlights 3 major elements that considers important to mention. So vulnerable people are at the center of the program, the provision of assets and capacity building, and among other elements. So the country program has been conducted in Colombia under the mandate of IFAD. It is a people's or individual-based organization. This funding helped to promote rural development that focus and put at the center the small producers, small-scale producers who are in a poverty situation. We work together with the Ministry of Agriculture and Rural Development, and we promoted and encouraged different communities to put their trust in the youth and in women in rural areas. This is the beginning of this kind of policy in Colombia, providing opportunities to these vulnerable groups was made possible by the virtuous combination of funding and the capacity building that is necessary to be able to manage those resources, those financial resources. For the first time, the Colombian government accepted that these resources could be managed directly by the beneficiaries. Many of those were indigenous people or of Afro-Colombian descent. Capacity was built for them to be able to get organized, to do business, to purchase goods, and to run their own accounts in a transparent and trustworthy manner. This has led to lasting results, strengthening resilience and sustainable development, which is key for IFAD programs. And focalization was essential to achieve our goals. Funding reached what we call the last mile in many cases, the projects run by the Ministry of Agriculture were the only arms the Colombian government that were present in a given community. We also managed to achieve a significant participation of women in both projects, 44% in the project of for rural opportunities and 56% in the project of El Campo Emprende. So top El Campo Emprende. The challenges that IFAD needs to face in order to combat rural poverty are quite huge. So it is quite normal to achieve both the negative and positive results. So in spite of the limited resources that were allocated to Colombia, we have managed to reach significant results, although the way to get there has not always been easy. So let me begin with challenges. The implementation of the projects took much longer than initially planned. The last project, TOP, El Campo Emprende, is an example of the very difficult road towards rural development. The implementation took very long to actually kick off, and it was at a given point in time, it was even a candidate for cancellation. And it was the director for Latin America and the Caribbean and her team who actually made a case in favor of its continuation, and in the end, it achieved very positive results. So this makes us think that we made the right call that was supported as well by the commitment of the Colombian authorities and IFAD's team, and an implementation that was quite effective. Among the tangible results that we have achieved, I think there are two of those that should be highlighted: increase in income and the nutritional improvement. So even though the final results of the top project are still to be determined, we already have some preliminary results that we can discuss with you. The families or households income increased by almost 62%, and virtually 92% of households increased in at least 3% its tangible and both intangible assets. So we are really very satisfied with these results. And now, regarding nutrition and the Rural Opportunities Project, there was a reduction of by 5% in malnutrition among children below 5 years of age, and in the top project, 76% of the beneficiaries considered that the quality of the food or the intake of food had increased. So this information is essential in order to guide the next joint interventions that we will be conducting in Colombia. Here in my department, we have a very strong commitment to improve and enhance the interventions, and the results of these evaluations will be integrated in future programs. This will also be a benchmark for our future interventions of IFAD around the world. And to conclude, I'd like to reiterate my acknowledgement to the Colombian authorities that allowed us to have access to the relevant information. It has been an excellent collaboration, and we trust that this experience will be very useful in the future. And I wish you all the best for the rest of this workshop. Thank you very much, everyone.
Thank you very much, Associate Vice President, for those words. We're now going to hear the main conclusions and recommendations of the country strategy and program evaluation for Colombia, given by Mr. Fabrizio Feloni, Deputy Director of the Independent Office of Evaluation, and Claudia Ranabolda, a Senior Consultant from the IOE. Thank you very much for giving us the floor. Good morning, good afternoon to all the participants. This presentation that you should be able to see on the screen now has three main sections: the aims, scope, and methodology of the evaluation, the main findings, and conclusions and recommendations that stem from the evaluation. So, as you can see, this is a strategic evaluation which looked at the performance and results of the strategy and program financed by IFAD in Colombia to come up with conclusions and recommendations which will help us to boost the efficacy of the association between the Colombian authorities and IFAD to reduce rural poverty. The period of the evaluation is 15 years. It ran from 2008 to 2022. And in that period, the evaluation covered two strategic programming cycles, from 2008 to 2015 and from 2016 to 2022. There were two projects, Oportunidades Rurales and Campo Emprende. And the evaluation also covered 14 donations, which are a sample of a far higher number, over 40 donations, which were funded by IFAD in the country or the region of Latin America and the Caribbean. The loans portfolio during the 15-year period had a total estimate amount of 125 million US dollars, financed through 50.3 million IFAD loans, with financial contributions also from the government and international cooperation, particularly Spanish and European Union cooperation. Coming now to the methodology. The conceptual framework for the evaluation is backed by the theory of change, which was drawn up by the evaluation team. Data gathering included a document review, so literature analysis, virtual interviews with key partners, also analysis of the focus with cross data of anonymous data from the national census, and particularly important was field work, which was participatory with local guides. And there are also challenges due to the complex security situation in several parts where the project is carried out. I'm now going to hand over to Claudia Ranaboldo to outline the main findings, and I will come back to tell you about the conclusions and recommendations. So thank you very much. Very warm greetings to all of you who have joined us, particularly all those from government, associations, and other institutions that have supported us. I'll start by looking at the main findings in terms of strengths. In keeping with what we've just heard, we identified the relevance of IFAD support during the evaluation period in Colombia, essentially because it helped to a place in the Ministry of Rural Development and Agriculture, and more broadly, focuses and approaches that were innovative at the time for rural development, poverty reduction, poverty and inequality reduction. This was recognized by the government and very particularly by associations, and was really highlighted because IFAD had quite a small portfolio compared to bilateral and other multilateral agencies, i.e. $74 million over 40 years. The main innovations that were repeatedly identified. First, focus on smallholder farmers and entrepreneurs. Secondly, addressing this topic from the broad perspective of rural development, not limited only to agriculture and livestock, but rather also including assets, i.e. social, human, political, and cultural assets beyond agriculture. Thirdly, a demand-based approach. Unlike what we see sometimes in development projects, where many decisions are made centrally, in this case, the Colombian government actions supported by IFAD were heard and utilized to pinpoint demands and needs from the beneficiaries themselves, and these were then turned into business plans, financed, as we heard previously, also through direct state resource transfers to associations, which then managed them themselves, subject to certain rules. And also something we'll come back to this, co-financing through beneficiaries. The fourth aspect was capacity building, drawing on local knowledge and expertise in the field. So, in addition to the relevance and innovation that I've mentioned, there was also a good fit between a broad national coverage. We had many different municipalities involved with specific characteristics focused on poorer areas and including in Campo Emprende. This also covered post-conflict zones where security, violence, and so on were particularly difficult. And here what we saw was strengthening of local resilience and management of through associations in very diverse contexts. Also, I've said that we focused on smallholders and entrepreneurs, but it also engaged indigenous peoples, Afro-descendant communities, and in the later period, women and young people. And here, if I may, I'd like to draw your attention to the counterpart that was required from poorer populations to contribute. Now, this was a very key aspect in terms of ownership and identification and sustainability. The beneficiaries made their own contribution, and that allowed them to really take ownership of the project, which laid the foundations for future sustainability and scaling up. I won't talk in depth about the results. We've already heard a little bit, but they included substantial increases in revenues, employment, physical assets, particularly in Campo Emprende, because the baseline was a far greater poverty in many cases, food insecurity. So that was strengthened with more and better quality food, notwithstanding something which was very much flagged in Campo Emprende was the contributions that came through IFAD and Colombian government to rebuild the social cohesion and fabric, to strengthen solidarity between citizens who once again started to rebuild trust in a state that was investing in them. Empowerment of women and young people, beyond being actively engaged in society, in fact, as dynamic stakeholders of towns and rural areas, as places that allow for more dynamics, even between fragmented rural areas. We had over 40 donations, and of this, we took a sample of 14, and of that sample, we identified at least 2 types of donation that contributed to greater coordination with IFAD's lending operations, but also public policy models. The first was set up through Procasur, and really was a departure from traditional capacity building. And the other, and we'll hear more about this in a moment from the representative of Aqua, which was in line with social inclusion, which was to put cultural assets and diversification strategies really at the heart of the Afro-descendant community. Challenges. Sustainability, firstly. Business plans were sometimes less mature. Sometimes they'd only been up and running for 1 or 2 years, such as in Campo Emprende. These businesses needed to be made more sustainable for the future. And one key structural issue is something that the Colombian government is facing, as to do with companies going bankrupt. Also, IFAD has supported adaptation and climate change resilience. And here, environmental sustainability in previous operations basically came through agricultural practices with plots and individual business plans. And so it was important to use that territorial agrosystemic approach, as well as institutional sustainability, where we want to really stress more coordinated scaling up strategies and greater relations with local governments. They were involved in local evaluation and resource adaptation committees, sometimes very few in between. They co-financed plans. But in terms of the scaling up logic, we believe that far more could be done. And I'll wind up here, coming to my last slide, outlining some of the key aspects going forward. Synergies, which again allow us to maximize the impact, cooperation with other agencies, public and private institutions and companies. Also, really harnessing coordination between loans and donations, limited use of knowledge management products, including monitoring and evaluation products through the projects. And the aim is to more consistently and coherently have an influence on public policy. As I say, there was a limited portfolio and repeated issues with delayed payments, as I said. But I give the floor now back to Fabrizio to give you the conclusions and recommendations. Thank you. We have 5 key conclusions. The IFAD strategy and country program was relevant in a complex context, particularly by supporting rebuilding of the social fabric, household resilience and resilience of associations in contexts where there is high insecurity and vulnerability. The intervention model was right when it comes to its focus on populations and territories, because it engaged young people, poor people, women, indigenous peoples, Afro-descendant communities, poor and fragmented rural populations, and we also supported groups in medium-sized cities. So articulation of urban and rural areas was very important in the IFAD portfolio. Also, partial transition towards rural strategy diversification. Initially, micro businesses and farms were supported, and this then developed into more diversified holdings such as commercial services, tourism, agro-tourism, eco-tourism, environmental services, to mention but a few. This is a transition that is still underway, and the evaluation underlined the need to articulate more with territorial dynamics. And this comes to point 4 of the conclusions, where we found limited investment in terms of governmental institutions. This is important to foster solid territorial dynamics. Last but not least, some bottlenecks which hamper IFAD's potential in Colombia. For example, few alliances with other international cooperation agencies, and also sometimes interministerially. There are very many donations which are valuable. Unfortunately, however, there isn't always coordination between them, and not always dialogue between IFAD's loans and donations. Also, limited resource availability to communicate the program's findings and conclusions, which could be used for public policy decision makers. And we have some recommendations stemming from these conclusions, which are presented here. Firstly, the importance of channeling a bigger resource portfolio to broaden IFAD's country program, not only increasing resources through new IFAD resources, which may already exist through existing windows, but also by mobilizing other international funds and triangular cooperation, obviously liaising with the government through dialogue with the Ministry of Inland Revenue. Number 2 is define a new cooperation agenda with the government. And this is multifaceted. I just want to flag a couple of these points. Firstly, thematic priorities. The evaluation stressed the need to support pluri-activity and the multifunctionality of family farming, above all, adapting to climate change. There's also plurality in geographical terms. There are recommendations to focus IFAD's upcoming involvement, for example, on the 4 Pacific departments as areas where they could focus. Also, population priorities towards indigenous, Afro-descendant, displaced women and young people. Third recommendation is to boost IFAD's and the government's involvement in activities such as knowledge management, which is a very rich part of the IFAD-backed portfolio, strengthening cooperation agreements with international agencies, including governmental agencies, and mechanisms for policy dialogue engaging local stakeholders. And above all, the evaluation underscores the need to increase natural resource protection and protection of biodiversity and climate change adaptation. Another recommendation is to foster capacity building by involving institutions such as the National Learning Service, higher technical schools, universities, which are committed to the territories, and lastly, to devise a focused communication strategy to harness the outcomes as public goods. Thank you very much. And I now give the floor back to the Ministry of Foreign Affairs.
Gracias, señor Feloni y señora Ranaboldo, por esta presentación de hallazgos, recomendaciones y conclusiones. Damos paso ahora a la sección de mesa redonda moderada por el señor Fabrizio Feloni. Señor Feloni, tiene de nuevo la palabra.
Gracias, gracias. Y con su permiso tenemos más o menos una media hora para poder escuchar intervenciones de socios que se comprometieron en el programa financiado por el FIDA. Y podríamos primero escuchar representantes de agencias nacionales de Colombia para que puedan quizás presentarnos las principales enseñanzas que han traído del programa de colaboración con el FIDA. Y en este sentido, con su permiso, quisiera averiguar si hay representantes del Ministerio de Agricultura, de la Agencia Presidencial de Cooperación Internacional de Colombia y del Ministerio de Medio Ambiente que quisieran tomar la palabra, unos 3 minutos para explicarnos un poco su experiencia y los aprendizajes principales de la colaboración con el FIDA. Entonces, con su permiso, ver si hay representantes del Ministerio de Agricultura, Agencia Presidencial de Cooperación Internacional o Ministerio del Medio Ambiente. Por favor. Sí, la señora. Sí, veo que hay. Por favor.
Bueno, yo soy Adriana Senior, yo soy la presidenta de la Corporación Colombia Internacional. Somos la organización ejecutora del programa FIDA para Colombia, y para nosotros pues ha sido una oportunidad maravillosa. Estuvimos siendo los operadores de oportunidades rurales desde el 2008 y luego con la convocatoria internacional logramos ser seleccionados por el FIDA como la entidad ejecutora de este programa tan importante. Fuimos los que más, digamos, estuvimos muy comprometidos.
We were very committed to ensure that we could, if you like, rescue the program to be able to today have this evaluation, which you are presenting. And let me say, with total, with not a shadow of a doubt, that what we have done in the rural areas of Colombia has been a social revolution. We have seen the results which you have borne out, and I feel very encouraged by the future projects you have in the pipeline for Colombia, to be able to, that will strengthen rural families in Colombia, also Afro-descendants, indigenous peoples, and rural women. We in the CCI are an NGO which has implemented many of the resources, and we can guarantee that the resources have reached the families and they will take full advantage of them. And the families have had, if you like, and thanks to this intervention, now have a new approach, not just to strengthening their production, but also helping their marketing, also receiving financial education. So for us, it is a real opportunity to be in this meeting and listen to all the proceedings. We were in the organizing committee, and we know well that the country does need an additional intervention from a key player such as IFAD. And one of the recommendations we take home is that linkage with other organizations, donor organizations, other ministries, so that we can all, if you like, push forward development in Colombian rural milieu. Thanks ever so much for allowing me to take the floor, and we do wish to continue being a key player to implement all. Thank you very much, Mrs. President of the International Colombian Cooperation Agency, Colombia Internacional, that is it. Thank you very much. Let us see if representatives from the Ministry of Agriculture here who may wish to take the floor. Hello, how are you? Good morning. I don't quite know how to request the floor in Zoom because we use a different platform. But anyway, I'm Daniela Perez. I am part of the Presidential International Cooperation Agency. And first of all, we'd like to highlight the work carried out and the strategy of the
resultados muy positivos, así como ha denotado los principales retos que se tienen en materia de desarrollo agrícola y desarrollo rural.
rural development for Colombia. We in the Presidential Agency for Cooperation know that IFAD is a strategic partner for all to deal with many of the challenges that we find in the Colombian rural environment. And we are looking at the possibility, as we have a South-South cooperation department, to see how we can replicate this strategy in countries of the region, quite apart from the ones where it's already been implemented. We are also would like to highlight the priorities of our national government, and rural families, peasant families are a key priority for our government. And we know that IFAD's efforts to support the Colombian government are key. And we'd like to invite IFAD to mobilize international cooperation, non-reimbursable national cooperation. But even though they are part of the UN agency, they also a fund, and they work on credit matters. And we would like to say that you have the full support of APC Colombia as a part of the non-reimbursable if you like, monies which Colombia receives. So we are delighted to see the results of the evaluation. APC Colombia, but they also participated actively in the evaluation. Thank you very much. Thank you very much. Thank you. Are there any other representatives of national agencies who might wish to take the floor? Hello, thank you, Daniela. Sorry, I'm not quite sure how to request the floor in Zoom. First of all, good afternoon or good morning to all of you. I'd like to thank this space. I'd like to thank the IFAD for their participation in Colombia the last 15 years. I'm Juan Camilo Bernal. I'm the national coordinator of the Campo Emprende project, the top Campo Emprende project, and we would like to agree with all the approaches which have been mentioned here, and we are very interested in, if you like, deepening a bit more in some of the items. Unfortunately, the quality of the speaker's sound is rather deficient. We shall attempt to do our best. In general, we would like to highlight that the national government approach and the international agricultural approach, agricultural cooperation approach, are very positive. And the results are there for all to see. The results are excellent. And we would like to highlight that our intervention is focused on areas which have been identified as key areas for intervention. In particular, areas which have been designed as priority areas. And one thing which is very important to remember is that we are beginning to intervene in these territories before in fact, the results have been seen, we have centered on areas where rural poverty was extreme. And we are also attaching great importance to international humanitarian law and the protection of civil rights. We wish to improve the assets and resources of our rural producers, but also are aiming to ensure that these territories can be transformed and that they can be very important in terms of national production. The last intervention with IFAD, we talked about a very interesting issue which was presented in Colombia, and is a capacity to guarantee resilience to the Colombian population. Despite the traumatic times they have lived through, with the territories which are subject to great vulnerability in extreme areas of poverty and lack of food security, any possibility of a scenario to transform these dynamics must be seized, and the rural population take it on board. And there is something very important I would like to highlight. The project has had a very long time span, but we have always believed that there were capacities. And what we want to ensure is that the rural population in Colombia is seeking opportunities, and when the opportunities are there, and when people are given autonomy and the capacity to act for themselves, the results are very positive. I think it is important to highlight that very soon we shall see the positive results from this intervention. And that is borne out by the evaluation process. We shall also be presenting more specific and concrete results with a view to improving social cohesion and the assets. But we, on the whole, are I fully share and identify with the points that have been raised here. And we would like to establish in a more precise fashion. We have great interest in ensuring that the resources can continue, if you like, being highlighted, and we to continue working in the rural areas. Thank you very much. I say the quality of the speaker's fund was very deficient. We have attempted to do our best. Thank you very much. Let us see if there are other representatives of national ministries or agencies who wish to take the floor. Now is your chance. Well, if there are no other requests of floor, or if you need a few more minutes, let us give the floor to the representative of the Foundation Aqua, Mr. David Soto, who is on the program here. So, Mr. Soto, you have the floor. Thank you very much, Fabricio. Thank you, IFAD, the director, representative in Colombia. It is an honor for us to have been invited to this encounter to look at the evaluation. We were actively involved in the whole evaluation process from our vantage point, from Aqua. We actually reached back to last year. It's the third donation which IFAD does to the Aqua Foundation. Aqua is a platform in Colombia for rural development for Afro-descendant rural populations. And it is a regional program, or program with a regional scope. So it goes beyond the borders of Colombia. The latest cycle included Peru and Ecuador. First and foremost, I'd like to stress the anticipatory approach of IFAD. They understood the differential approach back in 2008. I don't wish to, if you like, dwell excessively upon what that involved, but let me say that it was the first international cooperation agency in Colombia which decided to look at the needs of the Afro-descendant population thanks to its cooperation with the Aqua Foundation. That's one thing I'd like to really flag up. Then the other point is that at the outset, in Colombia, we sought a direct relationship between a donation to the Aqua Foundation and the other two, and the Ministry of Agriculture. So we wanted there to be a linkage there. So the work that the Ministry of Agriculture carried out in the Pacific area of Colombia, where there is a considerable African Colombian population, and well, we were present in those territories, and we had deep knowledge of the area. And those were territories where international cooperation had normally neglected. And the foundation, in the measure that it has worked with Afro-Colombian populations, is the epicenter where we have managed to, if you like, centralize resources from IFAD with funds from other international agencies, with a view to tackling the lack of coordination between international agencies. We've worked with more than 20, right? But always based on work with IFAD. So now, when it comes to evaluation report, let me say that today the complexity of Colombia could be an opportunity for international cooperation and could become a regional opportunity. There's one key element, a common thread, is that the policies developed by the current government, if you look at all the pillars of the national policies currently, there is a strategy to turn it into a regional policy. We can talk about environment, climate change. You can see what this government is seeking, and let me refer you to President Petro's address in the General Assembly, combating drugs as a Latin American issue, a regional issue. A multilateral trade is another case in point, and the popular economy, and that is something which should be referred to later. We should refer to later, but it does open up opportunities for the challenges mentioned by IFAD. And now looking at the APC and South-South cooperation, I think we should see how these programs can be developed given this regional strategy. And if we look at the APC in Colombia, and I refer to my colleague Daniela Perez's words, if we look at population and territory, there are 2 points which are key. First one, which are referred to by the Vice President, and which you have also referred to, Fabrizio, and have to do with the rural-urban, if you like, linkage. There must be a mutual understanding of that, and knowing what the urban environment means for the development of our territory, in particular for the development of the Afro-descendant population in our country. That was a call which was made many years ago, when we weren't really clear in our minds where the dividing line or the boundary between the urban world and the rural world was. Another point which I do think and where we agree is the regional aspect. We do need a regional approach here. And when we are talking about regional approach, we're not just referring to country the other other country of the hemisphere. We're talking of the same region within Colombia, starting off from its identity, looking at regions based on appropriate territorial divisions. And the proposal is an interesting one, very interesting one from our view, which refers to this Pacific region, where we see a large mix of geographical diversity, economic diversity, and demographic and ethnical diversity. And we do need an approach which isn't fleshed out in the report, but which is a tricky one. It's looking at the PD strategy, which limits the urban-rural linkage, and it lacks this regional approach, or limits it, if you like. So I do think we need a formula which is perhaps more in line with the aspirations of the national government, sort of with regions. And I refer to the 4 departments of the which have been mentioned of Colombia. Mapping is key. We're going to send you a document being a bit dwelling a bit more on what I've been saying here, and what are the mappings we have carried out to identify and get to know what the territory is and act therefore. I think that could be an interesting example with a mapping that we carried out, supported by IFAD and in agreement with our objectives. If we look at conclusion number 3, which is a transition towards rural strategies, we fully agreement with the approach therein. We cannot take account of if you like, the rural world without crafts and traditions. They are cultural assets of an Afro nature. And that's a term which was 15 years ago, we're talking going beyond that mapping. We were talking of cultural assets of the Afro communities and the chances to ensure that they are revenue earning the strategies. I shall conclude simply by saying that we have worked in Peru, in Ecuador, in Colombia, in the latest phase, in the last program, on these 3 territories, and for well, in fact, for logical reasons, our work has not been carried out with the ministries of agriculture. We have worked a lot with the Ministry of the Environment in Peru, with the Ministry of Culture in Colombia, with the Ministry of Commerce, of Education in Ecuador. And last but not least, there is one point I'd like to conclude upon. It is very important that this approach should link up the different institutions, ministries. There should be an interdisciplinary approach. But I do think that the most accurate approach and the best approach to ensure that the policy which IFAD has marked out for Colombia is to look at programs which are part and parcel of the pillars of development. I'm referring to popular economy which is being developed in Colombia. There'll be no need to have to keep knocking on different doors. If we're looking for a development approach based on the territory, on rural areas and the rural challenges, and looked at income and development for Colombian citizens. When we get on board, which is what the foundation has done, you will find a pathway, targets, and you are bringing together efforts with organizations which are striving to push this policy forward. Last, hopefully we could talk of an agency in Colombia. And now this is very much my last word. We remain available to help you and to work together with you. This is an investment, after all, you have carried out. and should definitely push open to the future. Thank you very much for your contribution. And I think in the program, Mr. Fernando Bonilla from the Spanish International Cooperation Agency for Development. Please, Mr. Bonilla, go ahead.
Buenos días a todos y a todas. No, estoy tratando de activar mi vídeo para que me puedan ver, veo que no es posible.
Unfortunately, the sound of the speaker is not very good. Well, I hadn't asked for the floor. I'd like to thank you very much for the chance to participate in this activity. We, as Spanish Cooperation Agency, we are partners of IFAD, and we have worked with the Campo Emprende project. In general, we are very happy with the results. There is a recommendation. What has been very interesting is the need to set up a common approach, and unfortunately the speaker's sound is not very deficient. We shall do our best as interpreter. But anyway, we agree with the priorities being established for vulnerable people. That is something which we believe is essential. And we also coincide with this new approach to rural areas. And that is something which we believe is very important. And that is all. One of the difficulties is that a lot of these points have been raised could be are common, are cross-cutting in cooperation, and I'm talking of how we manage knowledge transfer, how we transmit that knowledge, and that's all really. We are interested in continuing to look at new lines of working in Colombia and adjusting better to the priorities of the new government. That's all. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. And now we will be listening to the experiences of professional associations, grassroots professional associations that were beneficiaries of the operations that were supported by IFAD. So maybe we can now listen to the experiences, the suggestions, and how to design future programs. So now, for this, I'd like to first give the floor to Ms. Mariluz Castro from the Pre-Cooperative of Women Entrepreneurs at Puerres, Nariño. So you have the floor now. Can you hear us? Can you hear us? I don't think she can. Maybe there's a connection, connectivity issue. So we could maybe now listen to Mr. Castro from the Azufral Association, Los Andariegos, from Tuqueres, Nariño. You have the floor now. So good morning to all participants in this roundtable, this workshop. My name is Juan Carlos Castro Astinegas. I'm the rep here on behalf of the Azufral Association of Los Andariegos, located at the municipality of Tuqueres at the Nariño department. It is an honor for us to be able to speak here before all of you to express our gratitude and our experience in these processes that we've carried out together with IFAD and all the organizations involved. As an organization, we've been able to develop capacities and to learn skills to provide ecotourism services in the region. We have also finished the building of a cabin where we provide housing for an accommodation for people who want to do some bird watching in the region. So we've been able to have not only a local, national, but also international impact. We've had people participating in our activities who've been really congratulating us on our efforts and the services we provide. So we would suggest, and we would humbly request that there is a greater emphasis on the involvement of the different stakeholders whenever you assess the successes, the commitments, and the achievements that we can actually, because we are the ones who cannot actually see them on the spot. And we've been able to witness how they have improved the livelihoods of the people in our communities. So visits, support for these opportunities is very needed, very much needed. There's potential in every single community. And with the support of these agencies, we will be able to actually achieve our goals and make them successful. I'd like to thank all the partners in this program led by the Ministry of Agriculture, thanks to IFAD and all of the different organizations whose support has been invaluable for us to achieve these results. We'd like to tell you that we are always at your disposal. We're available for anything that you would like to do in the future to promote these activities. Well, thank you. Thanks to you. So, Mrs. Milsa Fuelantana from the Aso Paraíso Association from Puerto Asís in Putumayo. Please go ahead. The Association of Farmers, Agricultural Producers. I don't know whether there are some connectivity issues here as well. So very good morning to you all. So this is Jesus Pachuchana. Please go ahead. So Mrs. Misa is not here at the moment. She is the representative of our commercial branch, but at the moment I'm the president of the association of Aso Paraíso Association. We were beneficiaries of since 2013. It was the first. Yours was the first support that we received. It opened up many doors to us. And so since then, we've received other important support because IFAD showed us to the world. We showcased us really, and we've been able to actually survive thanks to that support. Sometimes, other associations have failed and have not been able to survive because after this first initial support, there was no continuity. And so this is what we would really request from you in the future. So right now, we are producing certain foodstuffs, but we will diversify our production in the future. you know, so, and there's also thanks to IFAD that people could leave, the dirty jobs that they used to hold in the past. Most of them were working for drug lords, and now they've been able to work in agriculture, and that's something that we really want to be thankful. We are very thankful for. Well, thank you very much, Mr. Pachichana. And I'd like to go back to Ms. Mariluz Castro. Maybe she can now join us. She's the representative of the Free Cooperative of Women Entrepreneurs in Puerres. Can you hear us? If you can, please go ahead. You have the floor. And if the connection is not working and that there's nobody else who wants to speak, maybe I can now go back to Mr. Leon from the Ministry of Foreign Affairs. Thank you very much, Mr. Zeloni. Mrs. Natalia Baron, she is the advisor of the National Planning Department. She would like to speak to you. Oh, yes, please, go ahead. Hello, good morning, everyone, and thank you very much for inviting us to participate in this workshop, and thanks to the Ministry of Foreign Affairs for the coordination efforts. It is essential for us to be able to monitor all these credit operations. We are monitoring together with the Ministry of Finance all these credit operations in the country. This has been key for our sector. Even if it's only been 2 operations, they have been most significant. They have had a major impact in the region and in the agricultural sector in particular. We'd like to invite you for next operations or projects. We know that the Pacific area is fundamental, both for IFAD and for the government. But please don't only limit yourselves to that region. There are many other regions in the country. And please take a look at what we have in our current development plan on a national level. The right to be fed is also a fundamental right. And so this is something that we'd like to put on the table as well. Now, regarding your findings after the evaluation, there's an alignment and a coordination between the credit operations and the international resources. We believe these is essential for the good functioning of IFAD in the country. And we'd like to focus on exit strategies as well, because the organizations and agencies who are beneficiaries of the IFAD projects do need to be able to go on after after IFAD has left the country. So thank you very much to IFAD for your work in the country. Your very hard work. We would like to continue on that line. Thank you very much, and thanks to you. And now I think that we can now turn to the Ministry of Foreign Affairs. Mr. Leon. Thank you, Mr. Feloni. So we will now move on to some reflections on the country program. Mrs. Rosana Palastri, the Director for Latin America and the Caribbean in IFAD, will be now taking the floor first, followed by Mrs. Maita Peltola. Mrs. Palastri, well, thank you very much. Good morning, good afternoon, everyone. And a very, very warm greeting to the Colombian authorities that are together with us today. Thank you to the Independent Office of Evaluation. And thank you for the excellent cooperation between IFAD and the different Colombian government authorities that have been providing us very, very valuable support. And thank you to the team led by Maya Pentola. So the idea is to provide you with some reflections on the future of the program in Colombia. So, but first of all, let me tell you what I believe, what I think about evaluations, and to have such places for discussion as we've had today, because otherwise evaluations can be shelved and not discussed. But what we are here today is to really be able to respond to the priorities of the countries that we are supporting. And so this is why evaluations are so important, or standards are increasingly higher, but we increasingly try to adapt to the realities of the countries we work for. So evaluations come in at a very specific point in time. We are now working on a close-up. Recommendations and suggestions coming from this evaluation will be very helpful for the two new things that we need to do, the strategy and the program. And I believe that all of your suggestions will be most welcome. Our future programs will be also aligned with two important documents. The first, the National Development Plan. It is Colombia as a world power for life, which is currently under evaluation. And then the plan together with the UN system, which is also under assessment. In Colombia, with a very clear strategy and even with very limited resources, we can actually make significant changes. And now I'd like to say something because we've heard about, having had 64 million dollar investment in under IFAD. But yes, let's make this very clear. We are always working together with co-financing from either national or international co-financing or co-funding, but actually the $74 million that we have provided finance for, we are it's actually the double if you think of it, because we are what we call assemblers of funds, and the Spanish Cooperation Fund has been very much involved in all of this. So we've heard the experience of people that have told us how their lives have been changed after these operations. And in the future, we will put even more emphasis on what we know has worked and we know it hasn't. And there's three priorities in the government that the Colombian government has. First of all, is a focus on rural women. So El Campo Emprende and other initiatives have shown us that women can be the drivers of change in their communities, and then to operationalize the situation of the care of the situation of care, so women can become more involved in the economies, then resilience to climate change. So we can use good practices and nature-based solutions together with the Ministry for the Environment and Sustainable Development and the private sector. And third, also using best practices as the representative of the Ministry of Agriculture has told us, the government is looking for investment that can have a significant impact. And so together with the Rural Development Department, Ministry of Agriculture, we want to develop a program so the rural population can no longer be in poverty. We've mentioned what we can do, but maybe we should also be mentioning what Colombia can do. Colombia is a medium to high income country, and you can see in our portfolio that we are focusing mostly in low income countries and in fragile environments such as Haiti and the Caribbean. So we would like to work in Colombia on the good practices that Colombia can show the world, can show other countries. So knowledge management and knowledge exchange is something that we could make the best of. Then there is, we believe that it is a very encouraging future that we are facing in the comprehensive rural reform and the different processes for securitization, so for diminishing the uncertainty is in land ownership is going to be really very positive. And please take into account that everything that you will be doing in the future will be for the benefit of the rural population as a whole in Colombia. Thank you. Thank you very much, Mrs. Regional Director. And then Mrs. Naida Ozola, please.
Thank you very much and good afternoon. Thank you, authorities. It's a great pleasure to be here at this workshop. It's also a privilege because as the IFAD country director for Colombia, I have been able to see the results of these investments in the field, and not everyone has that opportunity. So I would like to briefly recall a couple of visits that I made. One was in October last year with the Campo Emprende team with Maria. And talking to people when they were asking us about the outcomes of investments and plans that they had put in practice. And they highlighted one very important aspect, which is something that we've heard during this workshop, but I wanted to flag because it's so important for a country like Colombia. And they said that through this joint work that they've done as trainers and smallholders, they have had to rebuild trusting relations with their neighbors, victims, and so on. And I think this is really key because it's through these investments that we can contribute to the peace process in Colombia. That's very important also because we often talk about income, needs for better diets, food security, but sometimes we overlook peace in this context. Another field visit during that same supervision mission was to a community, an indigenous community in Sucre, where we were able to sit down with a group of indigenous women. They had a canteen and they were serving food to families and providing catering services also. And they said, in the past, we were indigenous women, we would be at home looking after the children. We didn't have our own income. And after this investment and this project, we've been able to become business women. And that made them really very proud. And their business was going excellently. And of course, the IFAD team also felt very proud of that. So I just wanted to highlight these two anecdotes because I know that in the universe of IFAD investments, there are hundreds of stories like this. But looking to the future, I would like IFAD not to limit itself to working with the Ministry of Agriculture. We now have an opportunity to seek new alliances through the country. And We've had some contact with the Ministry of Environment and Sustainable Development, the Ministry of Sciences, and obviously we want to continue working on South-South and triangular cooperation with the Ministry of Inland Revenue and Public Lending also. But something I think that we still have to improve is private sector alliances. And I call upon you as our traditional allies and partners to work with us to extend and strengthen our alliances in Colombia to give more support to rural populations from various different channels. I'm very satisfied and pleased to have been part of this evaluation. I've been part of this management for 2 years now. So I must say that some of the work goes back to previous teams, but looking to the future, whether it's me or someone else leading the IFAD country program for Colombia, I have every confidence that we will do excellent work and achieve excellent results. Thank you. Thank you very much, Maya Peltola, Country Director for Colombia. So we're now going to hear from Fabrizio Feloni for the conclusions and followed by a closing words from the Ministry of Foreign Relations. Thank you very much. I'd like to take this opportunity to thank the Colombian national and local authorities for their support in organizing the evaluation, particularly last year's field visit. I'd also like to thank the authorities that have taken part in this workshop and helped to organize it, particularly Dr. Jorge Torres, Director of International Cooperation from the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, and Mr. Leon, who has been with us throughout this meeting, as well as representatives of the other agencies that have taken part. Here from Rome, we'd also like to thank representatives, particularly Ambassador of Colombia to the United Nations of Rome, Ligia Margarita Sepp, and Dr. Juan Camilo Zaretsky, a counselor for the Colombian Embassy in Italy. Of the IFAD colleagues, we obviously wish to thank the Associate Vice President, Mr. Donald Brown, the Director of the Latin American Caribbean region, Ms. Polastri, as well as Ms. Peltola, Country Director for Colombia, and all of those who have spoken during the roundtable, representatives of the Aqua Association and ICID, as well as grassroots organizations who have been involved and who have shared their direct experiences of these projects and the benefits that they have drawn from them. Just one final point to conclude the evaluation process. There is a final agreement which will be drawn up by the Colombian government and IFAD management, and it's an agreement on how to follow up the recommendations that are enshrined in the report. So that's the final culmination, if you like, and that'll be published with the new government IFAD strategy when it is submitted to IFAD's board for debate. So once again, thank you all to all participants. Thank you very much. Thank you for those kind words, Mr. Feloni. And lastly, I give the floor to Mr. Jorge Torres, Director of International Cooperation with the Ministry for Foreign Affairs. Thank you very much, Juan Pablo. Thank you, Fabrizio. Thank you also to all of the participants on this national workshop for evaluation results of the country strategy program evaluation. Firstly, I would like to thank the colleagues from IFAD and the Office of Independent Evaluation on behalf of the national government for all of the work that's been done to carry out this evaluation process, which culminates today in this national workshop as a key dissemination activity of findings to all of the other participants, government bodies, associations, cooperation partners. I also give you my thanks for taking part in this event, which has given us valuable lessons learned for IFAD's future work in the country, which will require joint work from all. And of course, the aim of this is to facilitate the transformative effects that we expect from cooperation. I'd also like to say that building a new program of strategic opportunities, which seeks to support government's work in reducing rural poverty, entails national measures such as combating hunger, popular and country economy, and management of climate change, which are enshrined in public policies for the benefits of the population. IFAD's support has been invaluable in all of this. This forum is an indicator that we are on the right path. Therefore, on behalf of the national government, I declare this national workshop for Colombia closed as part of the country strategy program evaluation. Thank you very much and good evening to all.
Gracias.
Gracias, colegas. Hasta luego.
Gracias, hasta luego.
Hasta luego.
Gracias.
Hasta luego, gracias.
Gracias.